Hello and welcome to Let's Talk. Today I'm here with Matt Hudson, who is one of our state representatives in our House of Representatives. And hi, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Elaine. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, it's good to have you back.
Nice to be here.
Matt, you represent Pembroke Pines as part of your district, which goes all the way to
All the way over to the other coast.
To Naples.
To Naples, yep, and Immokalee. I represent a little bit of the city of Miramar and a little bit of the city of Davie as well. But really, I represent an awful lot of Everglades on both coasts, and as it would turn out, it's really the unifying force in my district because it's the water supply for both coasts.
Crocodiles don't vote.
I'm not so worried about the folks that would vote. To me, it's an important resource that I think should be represented well.
Absolutely.
And it is such a critical source for our water supply on both coasts. I think it's important that one person actually represent it because the issues that affect one side affect the other side.
Yeah.
And in terms of our water supply. And there's things we can certainly disagree on, but water is generally not one of them.
Not in South Florida.
Right, we need it, so yes.
Okay, so the legislature closed for the holiday.
Yep.
And we need to talk about what happened this year that you're really proud of. What'd you do?
Well, I passed a number of bills this year, and I've been very fortunate that my colleagues have found that the bills that I've put forward are reasonable and by and large almost always pass in a bipartisan way. I've had some even pass unanimously. And one of the things that happened this year is my role changed. Last year I was vice chair of health policy. This year I was chair of health appropriations, and so I had to craft a almost $30 billion budget, which impacts a lot of Floridians in a lot of different areas. But
I should say so.
Indeed, and I took that responsibility very seriously, knowing that we had a almost $4.5 billion shortfall, and that cuts would in fact need to be made. But we didn't cut funding to our seniors. We preserved every dollar for mental health and for substance abuse issues.
Good for you.
We preserved every dollar for all our local service programs here in Broward County that are so important, things like Meals on Wheels and those types of programs. Worked hand in hand with our good friend Edith Letterberg, who is just a delight, and with Senator Rich. And we also preserve funding for all of our veterans. We preserve funding for our seniors in a different kind of way. I actually increased funding to allow for more seniors to be taken care of at home as opposed to having to go to nursing homes and so forth.
Such an important issue.
It's a matter of quality of life, and I know from my own grandparents
they
preferred to
less.
It does, and so I spent more money for home and community-based care and for opportunities to keep people out of nursing homes
I know
rather
that
than put them
Senator
in there.
Rich is very, very high on that one issue as well.
Indeed, and she and I agreed on that issue quite a bit, and we found a lot of commonality on those types of issues, and there were certainly things we disagreed upon. But by and large, that was a big accomplishment, just putting together that sheer volume of a budget.
Sure.
I did pass a bill this year that flew largely under the radar screen. I don't think any media outlet in the entire state of Florida picked up on it, quite frankly, and that's not why I did it, certainly, but it's really amazingly important. Last year, the federal government changed the rules for federal financial aid for our students that would be enrolled in our independent colleges and universities in Florida. And, folks that might be listening might have children or students themselves or grandparents might be thinking about, well, my grandson or my child is going to head off to college this fall. Well, under the rules that the federal government set last year, if I hadn't passed this bill, not a single one of our students that were heading to an independent college or university in Florida would have been eligible for any federal financial aid.
Wow.
They literally, in one fell swoop, decertified every single one of our independent colleges and universities and said, hey, you need to send us a new list. Well, these schools have been around forever. No one could really understand why they even did this. And so it's a very simple bill. It just recertifies a list of our schools. But I think it's important to think about some of these schools. Nova. Think about the number of students that go to Nova from our
And such a good school.
And a great school. Do wonderful things there. University of Miami. Kaiser University. I mean, a lot of, that impact over here. Edwin Waters University. I mean, just a ton of different schools. And so that's one of those little bills that passed unanimously, that I had bipartisan support on, co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle on, because it was just absolutely the right thing, and happy we got it done.
How come the state can do some bipartisan bills and the federal government can't?
I think it's funny you say that, because the federal government doesn't, and it doesn't really matter which party's in charge, quite frankly.
Yeah, I know.
If you look at the fact that this year in the legislature there were, I think the number was about 2,200 bills that were filed between the House and the Senate. And we passed not only the balanced budget, but we passed 246 substantive pieces of legislation. Now, if I went back and looked at the actual vote records and all those kinds of things, I could tell you exactly. But I would bet you that on average, I bet 90% of those bills that we passed in either a bipartisan or unanimous way. And I think the reason for that largely is the fact that we know that we have a 60-day window that we're in session in Florida. We're citizen legislatures,
right.
So we have to go back to our regular jobs and doing our regular activities, and that we don't have time to get in those knockdown, drag out, I'm over here, you're over here type
Right.
of battles. There are some of that, obviously, certainly not going to say that there's not politics in politics, but at the same token, there's many things that,
I know, because
that we can just get
the
it
other
done.
representative, Elaine Schwartz, is going to tell me about things that she couldn't get done
Correct.
because
Right.
of politics.
Right. Well, she's going to certainly argue the other perspective of that, but I would be willing to bet, and I'm not a betting guy, that if we pulled the vote records, we'd see that of the bills we passed, you had bipartisan support on about 90% of them.
I think that's wonderful.
It is great. And actually, Representative Schwartz sat on my Health Appropriations Committee, and one of my bills that ultimately didn't pass the Senate but did pass the House, she actually debated in favor of. And so
Good for her.
where there's opportunities to agree, I think that's one of the nicer things, is we can find that opportunity and do so in a good way. Representative Porth here in Broward County, one of my dearest friends in the legislature, we don't agree on an awful lot of things, but we're gentlemen in the process. And even when we don't agree, there's more of a respectful debate, I think, where we're mindful of each other's issues and do so in a nice way. Whereas in D.C., I think the rhetoric gets in the way a lot of times.
Possibly,
Yeah.
possibly. Is there anything that you wanted to put through that you couldn't get through? That was an important bill that might come up in the next session?
Well, the bill that I just mentioned that Representative Schwartz actually debated in favor of, that was a very large bill that dealt with healthcare deregulation, getting rid of duplicative reports and streamlining a lot of things that just were antiquated and useless.
It's about time.
Yeah, and it was a 200-page bill. It was a very large bill, and unfortunately, we ran out of time, and it just didn't pass in the Senate based on time. And so that would be a bill that I would like to see move forward, because when we originally passed it out of the House, passed 106 to 6. That's bipartisan, by golly, And then
I should
went
say
over
so.
the Senate, came back, and we did some changes to it, and I passed it 119 to nothing out of the House,
Wow.
back to the Senate. And so I know it to be a good, solid bill
Yeah.
that people can
They
get their
didn't
arms
have
around.
time to pass
Right.
it.
It was, by the time we had bounced it back and forth, we just physically ran out of time
Yeah.
in session. So I think there's an opportunity for that bill to be carried on again. And to the listening audience, I would say this, because there's one thing that I truly, truly believe in, is that it doesn't matter if your elected official is at the local level, the state level, or the federal level, you should hold them accountable for their actions. And so one thing that I do that I think is a little different than any of my colleagues on either side of the aisle, quite frankly, is I do a daily update on Facebook to tell people what I'm going to be doing. And if you like what I'm doing, tell me. If you dislike what I'm doing, tell me. If you think I stink, vote me out. But I'll tell you what I'm doing every day so that you can hold me accountable. So those folks that are watching, friend me at Rep. Matt Hudson on Facebook. I'll tell you what I'm doing. When I'm in Tallahassee, I'll do Today in Tally, and I'll tell you what I'm up to. And if we're having a key meeting or a key vote, I'll actually give you the link to be able to watch it live. And sometimes I'll actually
That's
live.
nice.
Yeah, I'll even live tweet some of the meetings and take people's questions while I'm sitting on the dais in a committee meeting. I'll take questions from my constituents to be able to ask in committee, because I think your representative should truly be representative of the people that put them there. And
You're
I
supposed
try
to
and do that.
represent the people.
Exactly. And if you don't listen to people and talk to people every day, you're not going to be able to do that effectively, and I try and do that.
Representative Matt Hudson, I think you're a great guy.
Well, thank you, Elaine. I enjoy this thoroughly. Thank you.
I do too. For OCTV, I'm Elaine Kugelman, and thank you for watching Let's Talk with State Representative Matt Hudson.